When Henry turned 62, he believed, like many do, that his family would always be there. After all, hadn't he done everything right? Raised two children with his wife in a modest house just outside Asheville, North Carolina, skipped personal luxuries, took extra shifts, sacrificed sleep, time, and comfort, because that's what love looked like to him. He never said it out loud, but he held a quiet belief. One day, if he ever needed help, his family would come through. In the beginning, there were signs they might. Sunday dinners were filled with laughter. Holiday visits brought the warmth of home. His daughter would text. His son would call. But time moved fast. Jobs changed. Grandchildren arrived. Priorities shifted. The calls grew shorter. The visits came less often. And one evening, after a storm rolled through and a leak opened in his living room ceiling, Henry sat on the couch, watching water fall steadily into a metal bucket. He didn't want to bother them, not because he feared rejection, but because he saw the exhaustion in their eyes, heard the weight in their voices. They were doing their best, just like he had once done. And for the first time, he realized something he had never truly faced before. Waiting for others to catch you when you fall is not the same as being prepared to stand on your own. That night, Henry made a decision that would reshape the rest of his life. He would no longer build his future on the hope that others would rescue him. He would build a foundation so solid he wouldn't need to be rescued. He began with what most people ignore until it's too late: his finances. It wasn't about becoming wealthy, it was about becoming independent. He reviewed his savings, downsized his expenses, and started treating every dollar like a seed. Each one had the potential to grow security, peace of mind, and control. Control over his health decisions, control over his living situation, control over how he spent his days. People often say that money can't buy happiness, and perhaps they're right. But money can buy autonomy. And autonomy, especially after 60, is what keeps your dignity intact when life becomes unpredictable. Henry didn't tell his children what he was doing. He didn't need to. This was a promise he made to himself. A quiet one, but powerful. Because real support isn't a phone call you hope for. It's a plan you create. And true stability isn't given to you. It's built, one wise decision at a time. Grace had always been the strong one. At 67, she still moved with the quiet confidence of a woman who had raised 4 children, managed a household, and never once let herself fall apart in front of others. She'd once been the kind of person who could carry all the grocery bags in one trip, who could shovel the driveway before anyone else was awake, who never said no when someone asked for help, no matter how tired she was. But one morning, as she tried to open a jar of honey, her hands trembled. The jar slipped, and for a moment she just stared at the mess on the kitchen floor. It wasn't about the honey. It was about the sudden, creeping awareness. Her strength was fading. She had always thought aging would be gradual. A little stiffness, a few gray hairs. But the truth was crueler. It came in waves. Her knees ached on the stairs. Her back throbbed after carrying a basket of laundry. And no matter how deeply she slept, she never felt rested. For months she brushed it off. Just getting older, she'd say with a smile that masked her frustration. She figured that if anything serious ever happened, her daughter, a nurse, would be there. Or her son, who lived only an hour away. But when the flu hit her that winter, and she found herself too weak to get out of bed, no one was immediately available. Her daughter had back-to-back hospital shifts. Her son had a sick child of his own. Grace lay there in the quiet, body aching, unable to cook, clean, or even shower. Too proud to ask neighbors for help, too dizzy to drive. And in that silence, reality whispered something she couldn't ignore. No one can carry your body for you. After she recovered, Grace didn't wait. She started small. Morning stretches, a walk around the block, swapping out her evening wine for herbal tea. She stopped skipping her checkups. She started asking questions her doctors had long wished she'd ask. And most importantly, she began listening to her body. Not when it screamed, but when it whispered. She didn't aim to be who she was at 40. She aimed to stay upright, independent, capable, to be someone who could still cook her own meals, clean her own kitchen, open her own jars. Because no matter how much her family loved her, they couldn't eat vegetables for her. They couldn't take her blood pressure. They couldn't reverse the slow decline of a body that had been ignored for too long. Health is not just the absence of illness. It's the presence of strength. The kind of strength that doesn't always look heroic, but is. The strength to get up from bed, the strength to walk without fear, the strength to remain, in every way that matters, free. If you're finding value in this story so far, consider taking a quiet moment to reflect on your own habits, what you're prioritizing and what you're postponing. And if it resonates with you, share this video with someone who might need to hear it. You never know whose life you'll help by starting a conversation. After her husband passed, Lillian thought she'd miss the big things. His laugh echoing through the kitchen, the way he danced with her in the living room on Sunday mornings, the late-night talks about nothing. But what haunted her most was the silence. She had always been surrounded by people. 4 kids, a rotating door of neighbors, cousins, friends, birthdays, graduations, anniversaries. Life used to feel like one long celebration. But by the time she reached 74, the noise had faded. The house was quiet now, not because it was peaceful, but because no one was coming. It started slowly. Friends moved to warmer states. Some fell ill. Others simply drifted away, one unreturned call at a time. Her children visited when they could, but they had jobs, children, lives full of motion. And Lillian, once the center of every gathering, was now the voice on the answering machine they promised to call back. At first she waited. She waited for the phone to ring, for someone to knock on the door, for company to appear like it used to. But weeks passed, then months. And one day she sat at the kitchen table, pouring tea for one, and whispered to herself, "I've become a ghost in my own life." It wasn't depression, it was something subtler, a slow dimming of her world, a shrinking of connection that no one warns you about. Loneliness, she learned, doesn't come crashing in. It creeps, gently, almost politely. But Lillian wasn't ready to disappear, so she did something radical for someone who had spent decades nurturing others. She nurtured herself. She found a book club at the local library, even though she hadn't read a novel in years. She went to the community center's walking group, not to exercise, but to talk. She reconnected with a neighbor she hadn't spoken to in over a decade, and they began having lunch every Thursday without fail. And little by little, the silence receded. It wasn't about being the life of the party. It was about hearing someone say your name, about sharing a laugh, about knowing that tomorrow someone expected to see you. Social connection isn't a luxury in old age, it's a lifeline. Friends don't have to be many, but they must be real. Because while family may love you, they can't fill every empty chair. You need people who choose you, not out of obligation, but out of joy. And the beauty is, it's never too late to begin again. To walk into a room full of strangers and come out with a new reason to smile. Lillian did, and so can you. If this chapter reminded you of someone you care about, a parent, a neighbor, even yourself, don't let that thought pass. Call someone today, reach out. Or better yet, join something. Say yes to something. Begin something. Because life doesn't shrink on its own. We allow it to. But we also have the power to expand it again. Walter had never been afraid of aging. He didn't mind the wrinkles. He made peace with the slower pace. Even the occasional forgetfulness didn't bother him much. But what he hadn't expected, what no one had warned him about, was waking up one day and realizing he no longer knew why he was getting out of bed. For 42 years, Walter had been an electrician. He was proud of his work. He liked solving problems with his hands, liked seeing the lights flicker on when a job was done right. He never thought of it as a calling. It was just what he did, until he didn't. When he retired at 66, people celebrated. There was cake, a gold watch, handshakes from men he'd worked beside for decades. And then there was silence. No more early alarms, no more phone calls, no more sense of being needed. At first, it felt like a vacation. He slept in, watched old westerns, spent afternoons on the porch. But slowly, rest turned into restlessness. Days began to blur together. Hours dragged. He found himself walking into rooms and forgetting why. Not because his memory was fading, but because there was no purpose to the motion anymore. He tried to ignore it, told himself he'd earned the right to do nothing. But one morning, as he stared blankly out the window while the sun rose over his quiet backyard, a thought came to him, sharp, unwelcome, and honest. If I disappeared today, would anything in this world be different tomorrow? That thought haunted him for days. Until one Sunday, while picking up a screwdriver set at the local hardware store, he overheard a young man struggling to understand how to rewire a light fixture. Walter leaned in, offered a bit of advice. One thing led to another, and before he knew it, he was helping the kid fix up his first apartment. That was all it took. Within a month, Walter had started volunteering once a week at a local trade school, showing teenagers how to safely use tools, fix things, think with their hands. And with every question they asked, every aha moment he witnessed, Walter felt something flicker back to life inside him. He had purpose again, not in the way it used to look. He wasn't climbing ladders or working 60-hour weeks. But he mattered, he contributed. He left each day knowing someone had learned something because he showed up. Purpose doesn't retire, it evolves. Maybe you don't build houses anymore, but maybe you help someone else build confidence. Maybe you don't raise children now, but maybe you mentor someone who never had a father figure. Maybe you're not leading meetings, but you're leading by example in your community. What matters is that you wake up with a reason, and the beautiful truth, that reason doesn't have to be big. It just has to be yours. Marianne had been married for 51 years. Not all of them were easy, but they were hers. When her husband Robert passed away the winter she turned 73, the world didn't end. That's what surprised her most. The sky didn't fall. The clocks didn't stop. Her neighbors still waved good morning. The postman still came, and the grocery store still played the same soft music under fluorescent lights. But inside her home and inside herself, something had shifted. The chair where he used to sit, the coffee he used to make, the way he'd call her name like it was the first time, every time. These small absences became heavy. The air felt thicker. The house echoed more. At first, she leaned on her children. They came often, brought food, made her laugh when they could. But life called them back to their routines. The calls grew shorter. The visits became monthly. And Marianne, always gracious, always smiling, assured them she was fine. But at night, she wasn't. There were evenings when the silence felt unbearable. Moments when the weight of grief sat on her chest like a stone she couldn't move. And one day, standing in the hallway holding a photo of their wedding day, Marianne whispered out loud, "What do I do now without you?" The silence answered, "You keep living. Not for him, not for them, but for you." That was the turning point. She realized that no one could carry her sorrow for her, that grief wasn't something to be escaped. It was something to be lived through. And so she began. She started writing in a journal every morning, just 5 minutes, just her thoughts. Then she joined a local support group for widows. She didn't speak at first, just listened. Listened to other women cry, laugh, remember, rebuild. In their voices, she heard pieces of herself. And then one day she spoke, and something in her shifted again. Marianne didn't stop missing Robert. She never will. But she stopped expecting the world to hold her together. She learned to hold herself. Emotional resilience isn't about never falling apart. It's about knowing how to rebuild when you do. She began meditating each morning, not to find peace, but to make room for it. She planted a small garden in the backyard, a place where she could get her hands dirty and feel something grow. She forgave herself for the bad days, and when the tears came, and they still did, she let them fall without shame. Because strength, she learned, is not about never breaking. It's about refusing to stay broken. If this story speaks to something inside you or reminds you of someone you love, take a quiet moment today. Write down a thought. Take a breath with your eyes closed. Let yourself feel something you've been putting off. And if you think someone else needs to hear this, consider sharing it with them. A single story can be the start of someone else's healing. Frank had always been a man of habit. He ate dinner at 6, watched the news at 7, watered the plants every Thursday. For most of his life, routine brought him comfort. Predictability meant control. Control made the world feel safe. But after he turned 76, life started ignoring his rules. The corner cafe where he used to read the paper every morning closed down. His longtime barber retired. Two friends moved to be closer to their grandchildren. His church merged with another and changed its meeting time. And when his old flip phone finally gave out, his grandson handed him a sleek new device he couldn't even unlock without help. At first, Frank resisted. He refused to download apps, ignored invitations to virtual meetings, dismissed new technology as nonsense. He told himself the world was just moving too fast, and he had earned the right to be left behind. But the more he resisted change, the smaller his life became. Until one day, while rummaging through a drawer of tangled cords and faded letters, he came across a photo. It was of him and his wife, Lucy, taken on their first trip to Europe. They were laughing in front of a broken train schedule, rain pouring down, their plans ruined, their smiles radiant. He stared at that picture for a long time. In that moment, it struck him. Not a memory, but a lesson. The best parts of his life didn't happen when things went according to plan. They happened when he adapted. So he decided to start again. He learned to use the smartphone. He joined an online chess group, though he lost every match in the first week. He signed up for a digital art class, discovering a love for sketching he never knew he had. When his neighbor's son invited him to a podcast recording, he said yes, even though he didn't know what a podcast was. Frank stopped asking the world to stay the same. He asked himself how he could grow with it. And as the seasons passed, something beautiful happened. The world opened up again. Not because it slowed down for him, but because he sped up just enough to catch it. Adaptability, he learned, isn't about surrendering who you are. It's about expanding it. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. And it's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully yourself, again and again, no matter the changes life brings. Because if there's one truth that anchors everything, it's this. You are not meant to stay the same. You are meant to evolve. And in doing so, you become your own safest shelter, unshaken, uplifted, unbreakable. If this final chapter has stirred something within you, perhaps it's time to pause, not to look back in regret, but to look ahead with courage. Share this story with someone who might be standing at their own closed door, unsure how to move forward. Let them know that it's never too late to become more alive than ever. And if you haven't already, subscribe to stay connected. Because we're not just sharing stories here. We're building something stronger than time, a foundation you can count on.